transformation, or what many called the Second Liberation. After nearly a decade of single-party rule, the pressure for change was reaching unbearable levels, and it all came to a head on July 7, 1990, a date remembered as Sabasaba. That morning, thousands of Kenyans marched towards Kamukunji grounds in Nairobi, demanding free elections and the release of detained opposition leaders like Raila Odinga, Kenneth Matiba, and Charles Rubia. The rally had been banned, but that didn't matter. The people came anyway. More than 20 lost their lives, hundreds were injured, and even more arrested. The bloodshed at Sabasaba sent shockwaves beyond Kenya's borders. By 1991, the pressure was coming from all sides. Internally, the democracy movement was gaining ground. Externally, Moi was facing immense pressure. In November 1991, the World Bank, IMF, and key donor nations issued Kenya an ultimatum: implement political and economic reforms or lose foreign aid. With Moi's government dependent on donor funding, he had no choice but to concede, agreeing to reintroduce multi-party politics, liberalize the economy, and reduce state control. On December 3, 1991, at a KANU delegates meeting, Parliament repealed Section 2A of the Constitution, ending one-party rule.
I am glad to inform Kenyans that I have today assented to the bill as a sign of my commitment to political reforms. When the elections are called, I urge all contestants to ensure that they conduct their campaign in a mature and peaceful manner.
Multi-party democracy was restored. Kenya would go to the polls in 1992, and for the first time in decades, Daniel Arap Moi would face real opposition. But the opposition that emerged was fractured from the start. Mwai Kibaki broke away from KANU to form the Democratic Party. The once united FORD, Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, splintered amid tribalism and personal rivalries. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga leading Ford Kenya, while Kenneth Matiba and Martin Chikuku formed Ford Asili. Each believed they were their rightful challenger who could finally end KANU's long rule. Many thought multi-party democracy would be the end of KANU, which had grown deeply unpopular. Even those who remained loyal were quiet, uncertain, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. That uncertainty became Moi's opening. The self-proclaimed professor of politics understood that elections were not won merely with votes. They were won with machinery, money, organization, and manipulation. With the old guard losing touch, he needed something new. He needed enforcers, ambitious, fearless youth who could mobilize voters, distribute resources, and do whatever it took to keep KANU in power. It all started over drinks at the Boulevard Hotel on January 5, 1992. KANU loyalists conceived a youth-driven campaign to mobilize voters and secure the ruling party's survival. Accounts from insiders suggest that the plan had the backing from the elite, with some of the president's children, Gideon, June, and Jonathan, reportedly involved from the very start. To lead it, they chose Cyrus Jirongo, a charismatic, ambitious young operator whose confidence and connections quickly earned him rare access to State House. Initially, June Moi served as the group's link to her father, but as Jirongo's influence grew, he began meeting the president directly. At his side was a 24-year-old William Ruto, then serving as executive officer of the YK92 Secretariat based at the KICC. Ruto, who had been active in KANU youth politics through university leadership, managed the organization's day-to-day operations. He often worked from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., coordinating youth mobilization efforts across the country. YK92 became his political training ground. Though he was a first-year's master's student, he paused his studies for nearly a decade to dedicate himself fully to the movement. The founding group of 23 eventually grew into a central committee of nearly 40 well-connected young operatives. On March 4th, 1992, Youth for KANU 92 was officially launched at the Nyayo Stadium. The rally was massive, a spectacle of music, banners, and money, signaling that KANU was back, armed with youth, energy, and unlimited resources. Which begged the question, where was this money coming from? Well, behind the scenes, the Central Bank of Kenya was quietly flooding the system with new currency printed without real economic backing. Billions of shillings flowed into YK92's accounts, some of it siphoned directly from the Golden Bag scheme, the largest financial scandal in Kenya's history, which we covered in depth in an earlier episode. Jirongo himself would later admit that the money did indeed come from Golden Bag and it funded their campaign.
This money that Moi used to give you guys, I'll go and do wapi. I've told you, I also got 500 shillings.
Now, these are
at
issues.
the KANU office. So if you address
let me explain to you. These are issues.
Address them.
Obviously, it was Golden Bag money.
You are not printing money.
Now, if
You guys
the only people who can print money is the government.
Video. Because
Now,
Moi and the government, Moi was the government. And that money was coming from a KANU office. It was not from a bank.
Kamlesh Patni, the businessman at its center, later bragged that he had saved Moi, boasting that he advised the president that even in a multi-party era, money would always decide the winner.
I will return on how democracy should work. But of course, in '92, there was a lot of fights, riots in the street, and they wanted multi-party.
Patni has advice for Arap Moi. His money will buy support for the president and weaken the opposition.
Just make it multi-party. Because the money is with you, you'll still win. But just for the show. I helped the president to survive.
Through Golden Bag, he channeled as much as 11 billion into KANU's campaign network. Across Kenya, YK92 operatives distributed bundles of crisp 500 shilling notes. The bills became so closely associated with the movement that the people nicknamed the note Jirongo. The flood of cash created a brief illusion of abundance. But in reality, inflation soared, the shilling collapsed, and the price of food and fuel doubled and tripled. But YK92 wasn't just about money. It became the enforcement arm of a darker strategy, one that would reshape Kenyan politics forever. You see many Kenyans who are genuinely confused about multi-party politics and political parties.